You're listening to My Favorite Show, where Dr. Richard Kaul and Greg Riccardi discuss the matters that matter most. Join the conversation by calling 800-962-1160. And now, Dr. Kaul and Greg Riccardi of My Favorite Show.
All right, thanks for listening. This is Greg Riccardi here with Dr. Richard Kaul. How you doing, Doctor?
I'm doing well, Greg.
And we are the co-hosts of My Favorite Show, and we'd like to take care of some housekeeping notes before we start. We'd like to let you know we have a website associated with our show. It's very important, and I'll tell you why. It's called MyFavoriteShow.com, and we videotape every broadcast when we have a guest in the studio or not, and you can go there and watch every broadcast of every show that we have. Also, we want to let you know that you can call in with questions. The number is 800-962-1160. Please call in with your questions. Now, what we're going to do today is a very unique thing. We're going to actually play, for a majority of the show, a pre-recorded interview or broadcast that Dr. Kaul and I did only this past Wednesday. And the reason for us recording this last Wednesday is that they just announced that they're going to be, a bill has been put forth by some people in the Senate. Why don't you explain again?
Well, actually, it's a bill has been proposed by a Democratic senator by the name of Loretta Weinberg, who's based in Bergen County. And it's a bill, I think it's S1533. And it's related directly to the healthcare sector. So it was of great interest to me, and I'm sure it will be to people who work in the healthcare sector and others.
Excellent. So what we'd like you to do is listen to the broadcast or listen to the recording that we made this past Wednesday. We can't take any calls for the moment, but we want you to listen to the whole thing if possible. And then at the end of the recorded broadcast, it's going to become live again. You can call in with your questions, again, to 800-962-1160. We're going to roll it in a second. I'll let you know, again, we're going to be speaking about this new law that's being proposed, as well as shed some light on Dr. Kaul's history and your professional history as well, right? Excellent,
correct.
excellent.
Yep.
So I'm going to start the recording now, and please listen. Thank you. Okay, folks, thanks for listening. My name is Greg Riccardi here with My Favorite Show. I'm sitting next to my co-host, Dr. Richard Kaul. How you doing, Doctor?
Doing well, Greg.
Fantastic. Okay, so this show is going to be a little bit different than our typical format where we take calls and we have guests and we're going to ask questions of a guest. This is going to be more of a broadcast or a show that's going to be probably a little bit more on the editorial side than our typical standard format. So, today is Wednesday, March 11th. We're not taking calls. This is a pre-recorded session. And we're here to talk about a law that is being put forth, to be passed or being voted on at some point. And it's regarding the medical profession, and it's a serious law that we want to talk about, right? So tell us a little bit about the law that they're proposing, Doc.
Right. Well, the law, which is known as Bill S1533, has been proposed by a senator by the name of Loretta Weinberg, and she is supposedly based in Bergen County. Mm-hmm. And what the bill essentially states is that physicians coming from foreign countries, when they apply for medical licenses in the state of New Jersey, they must disclose whether or not they have had convictions or actions taken against their professional licenses in their countries of origin.
Okay, so now that law is significant to us. Why?
Well, it's significant to me
mm-hmm.
and to the medical profession
mm-hmm.
For several reasons. It's significant, obviously, to me because it's a law that came about as a consequence of a case that I was specifically involved in with the New Jersey Medical Board, but which was predated by an incident in the United Kingdom. Mm-hmm. It's also relevant to the wider medical community in the sense that it places an onerous burden on both the physicians and the state in terms of verifying these details around the world. It's a very difficult thing to verify this kind of information in countries that don't speak English, don't have the same culture, where communication channels are limited. And it's also going to be a very costly affair, which, considering the current state of the New Jersey budget, I don't think is such a smart idea.
Okay, so let me take the listeners through a little story here. So imagine that there was a doctor who, it was discovered, was prosecuted in a foreign country for having been found guilty of manslaughter in a medical procedure, a dental procedure specifically, and then was granted a license here subsequent to that. And it was then found out about the history of this person passing away during the procedure, and they then want to take that doctor's license away. That makes sense to you, right?
It does make sense.
That they would want to. Okay, so if that's all you knew of the story, then it would make sense. Okay, so we have a doctor here that's practicing in New Jersey, and they are they're doing, whether they're doing a great job or not, they find out that the person was involved in a medical procedure where the person who was being operated on passed away. We would want to take we'd want to take action against this doctor and say, hey, you can't practice here, right? That's essentially what's going on, right?
Right, and that I agree with you. That is, or would be expected to be the general sentiment based upon what you've described.
Exactly. So now, what we're here to do is to provide some broader picture of this story, because we're actually talking about Dr. Kaul here. And by the way, there's a video of this broadcast on our website if you'd like to see this actually being recorded in the studio, MyFavoriteShow.com. So that being said, we're here to give you the broader picture of what's going on here. So now, the medical board recently took away your license. When did they do that?
June 2012.
Okay. So the broader picture that we want to essentially describe to our listeners is that the basis of the suspicion or the attitude around this is based in something regarding that case in the UK years ago, and that case may have been, we're going to let the listeners make the decision, that case may have been tried and processed in a way that doesn't really look good, or might not look good when you really hear the full picture, right? So let's go through that case and tell us what happened in that case.
You're referring to the case in the UK?
Case in the UK where the person who...
Okay, yes. That was a case I remember very clearly. It was March the 9th, 1999, and it occurred in North London, a place called Dalston, and on that day I was administering a dental anesthesia to a 57-year-old patient who underwent a 17-minute-long procedure. The procedure went fine, and at the end of the procedure, unfortunately, she went into cardiac arrest. I successfully resuscitated her. An ambulance was called, and she was taken to the closest hospital. Now, in the United Kingdom, there's a significant issue with a shortage of beds. So she was transferred from that hospital to another hospital to another hospital before she was able to be placed in a bed in the intensive care unit.
How long did that take?
About 3 hours. So she was in the ambulance for 3 hours.
Okay.
She was eventually placed in an ICU bed, and she was alive, and her cardiorespiratory system was working, and she was conscious. And very sadly, about 6 days later, after having been under the care, I should say, of about 15 different specialists, she passed away.
Okay. Why was it 15 different specialists, do you know?
They called people in who are specialists in hearts, lungs.
Were they all working at the same time, or was it, okay, this doctor doesn't know what he's doing, let's go to the next one? Why?
No, well, the way that it would work is there would be one consultant in charge, and he would ask for a referral for, say, her kidneys or her lungs or her bones or a possible infection.
Okay, so So she passes away, unfortunately, and then tell me what happened.
Well, that's where the kind of nightmare for me began. In the United Kingdom, they have a very different legal system, which I have to say, the British Medical Association is desperately trying to get changed. And it's quite often that when a patient dies under the care of a doctor in the UK, the doctor will be prosecuted criminally and will go to jail. And in fact, most doctors that do end up in that situation do serve jail time.
Wow. Okay, so they had this case. Now, just for the moment, what do you contend the reason for her cardiac arrest was? Let's just get that out.
In the trial and in the litigation of the trial, there were two competing theories. The defense experts that we retained, and we retained 6, one of them being the professor of medicine at Oxford, said that she had an underlying potassium abnormality, which was picked up when she was taken to the emergency room. And it was noted to be 2.3, which is very low, and is a significant risk factor for cardiac arrest. And I have been asked, well, why didn't you check that beforehand? And my answer, which has always been the same, is that in the United Kingdom, they do not pay for preoperative blood tests, and therefore there was no way that I could have obtained that information. So my theory, which I think was definitely the strong of the arguments, was that she had what was called a hypokalemic arrest. The alternative theory, which really didn't hold too much water, that was put forward by the prosecution, was that she was supposedly denied of oxygen, and that caused what's called a hypoxic cardiac arrest. And their rationale was that supposedly I was on a mobile phone, which during the trial was disproved when we had the engineer from the phone company come in and say no phones were being used. And that even led on to the prosecutor in the case accepting that there was no phone that was being used.
Okay, so they contended that the phone was being used, and that's you were distracted by using the phone. And then, how did that get into the press? That got into the press somehow?
Well, yes. The courtroom was packed. It was a 4-week trial, and a lot of information was put forth. And of course, there were journalists there. Now, they're meant to be responsible in how they write their articles, and they heard that a cell phone or a mobile phone might have been used, but they also heard that in fact it wasn't used when the engineer testified. So when they wrote their papers or their stories, they had to have a headline, and it's kind of difficult to say patient has hypokalemic arrest. It makes no sense, as opposed to saying doctor on cell phone, patient dies. So it's a headline. It's a sensational headline, but it was a lie. Right.
So now, just to be clear, and this is documentable, you have the documents of the case, right?
I do.
Everything. Okay. So an independent company came in and determined that the phone was not being used at that time, and it wasn't even in the room. Or what did they?
Yeah, correct. The name of the company was Orange Mobile Phone, and they had their engineers not only go to all of the towers that the signal could possibly have gone to, they tracked that. They tracked every incoming call, every outgoing call, and they even tracked any phone that I had ever owned at any point in a 5-year period, and found that there was no activity during the period that the patient was being looked after and during the period that the arrest was occurring. Okay, and this is again independently declared that this was not being used. Your phone was not being used. Yeah. It was independently declared, and as I said before, accepted by the prosecution.
Okay, so now why would they still convict you if they have undeniable third-party proof that you were indeed not using your cell phone during the case?
Well, this was
who made the accusation that you were?
There was a dental nurse by the name of Michelle Lochman,
Mm-hmm.
who had made that initial allegation early on.
Mhm.
And people said to me, why would she say that?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is that a week prior
Mm-hmm.
to this event, she had been caught stealing money
Mm-hmm.
from the practice,
Okay.
and she had been put on probation.
Okay.
So she was not in a particularly friendly frame of mind
Mhm.
towards me or the other owner of the practice. And my only conclusion is that this was her way of trying to create a problem for me.
Okay. So if that's true, right? If that's true, then I could see, and again, we'll let the listeners make their own decisions. But I could see that she might be upset with you for doing that, and therefore she, made negative accusations against you during that case. Okay. So now, who was there present in terms of the authority to? I mean, was it an attorney retained by the woman who passed away, or who was it that?
Well, are you asking who prosecuted the case?
Right,
It was the Crown Prosecution Service.
the Crown Prosecution Service. Okay, so if that's all you knew, right? If the public who wants to know what's going on, if that's all you knew, you'd say, "Wow, this is the Crown Prosecution." The Crown.
Yeah, the Crown, the Crown Prosecution Service.
Crown Prosecution Service. Sounds like a capable organization or entity. Who did they use to? Right, they're a prosecutor. They're not a medical prosecutor. So who did they use to corroborate the claim that, or build the case that you were negligent?
Well, the name of the head prosecutor was William Boyce.
Okay.
He's what's referred to as a QC, which is a Queen's Counsel.
Okay.
And underneath him there was a gentleman by the name of Alan Burrows,
Mm-hmm.
who was a barrister.
Okay.
And then there was a solicitor who worked for the Crown Prosecution Service.
Okay. And so Boyce is the prosecutor, and he must have had. No, he doesn't have medical background, right?
Well, I mean, he's not trained as a physician, but he would rely on experts.
Okay. So the expert that he relied on was whom?
Was Professor Strunin
Mm-hmm.
and Patricia Flynn.
Okay. And who were they?
They were both anaesthetists. They were both part of the Royal College of Anaesthetists,
Mhm.
and they worked in the same department at the hospital where Miss Bangura died.
Mhm.
So they were the two people that I had been involved in with regards to getting my American training and qualifications recognized.
Okay. So these people, you would think at first blush, if you were just reading this in the newspaper, why would they have any reason to fudge anything or claim something that may or may not have been true about your guilt or innocence in this case?
I think the answer to that, obviously, to me is pretty obvious. It comes down simply to the fact that I was involved in a very contentious legal battle that attracted a lot of press attention
Mm-hmm.
with the Royal College of Anaesthetists. I was trying to get my American training and qualifications recognized in the UK, and they were denying it because, in their opinion, American training is inferior to
Mhm.
British training, and American qualifications do not come up to the same standard as British qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
So I took them to court and I sued them, and it attracted a lot of press attention, and was a high-profile case.
Mm-hmm.
Now, predictably, I lost the case, and naively I was hoping I would win it, but I lost it. And about a month after the verdict from this hearing came back, one of my professors in New York said to me, "Why don't you come back to America?" So I agreed, and I started to reactivate my paperwork, and it was about a week after that I was involved in the case with Miss Bangura, and then the police began their investigation.
So you had challenged the RCA just prior to the operation where Miss Bangura passed away, right?
Correct.
Okay, that was how much beforehand? How long beforehand?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. So now, has the Royal College of Anesthetists ever been challenged before in the way that you did, in terms of you suing them to have them recognize your American training, your training that you had in America?
Yeah.
Has that ever been done before?
No, I was the first one to have ever done that, and that was why the case attracted such national media attention.
Okay, so we have a case where a doctor is involved, first of all, in a country where malpractice is treated criminally.
Correct.
Okay, we're in a country where malpractice can be treated criminally, and someone can be held criminally responsible if someone passes away during a procedure.
Correct.
Right? And in that case about that death, you have the authority who is making the claim that you were negligent.
Correct.
The authority is the same authority that you just sued 14 days prior to the procedure where she passed away.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm not going to make any judgments on that, but some people in the audience might see that, hey, wait a second, this case might be a little, steered in a certain way, because he just got off he just, where they're coming off the heels of you suing them in what could be considered an embarrassing case that someone's actually suing them.
Right.
And now you're on trial. What are they going to, right? What are they going to?
Yeah, I mean, the issue of conflicts of interest, was screaming out at me, and I did discuss the issue with the attorneys who were representing me. They didn't feel that there was going to be any value in having them recused from the case, which I strongly disagreed with, and I still to this day don't know why they did that. But it just made common sense to me that if you've just been involved in a legal battle with a group of individuals, and they are then chosen to be experts testifying against you in a criminal case, I don't believe that that's consistent with the way that justice should be conducted.
Right.
To me, it just seemed fundamentally wrong.
Okay. So now we have that whole possibility, potentially, of, inequity or a conflict of interest. When you were tried guilty, when the word came out, guilty,
Yeah.
what went through your mind was what?
Well,
what happened to everyone else that was guilty
well,
in a similar case?
They went to jail.
They went to jail. Now, what the judge said after the guilty verdict was surprising to you. What did he say?
Well, as soon as the guilty verdict came back, and I was standing in what's called the dock, the judge's immediate words were, this is not a case for immediate imprisonment. Your professional and personal life has been destroyed. Your fiancé has left you. You have lost everything you've worked for, and that is punishment enough in and of itself.
Okay.
And,
now,
and I'm going to administer what's called a 6-month suspended sentence, which means very simply that if you get into trouble, you'll be back in court.
Kind of like probation.
Which the judge said, I very much doubt that's going to be the case. And then he said, you're free to go.
Okay, so now it's probably impossible to tell, right, how many physicians went through the same scenario that you did in being tried and found guilty.
No, there are statistics.
Well, how many? Okay, then how many were tried in a similar case to yours previous to that?
Well, the prosecution, or the criminal prosecution of physicians, had actually started in the 1800s. But in the early 1990s, there was an attempt by the prosecuting body in the United Kingdom to say, well, if we're going to hold truck drivers liable for manslaughter, then why shouldn't we hold doctors liable for manslaughter?
So how many were jailed after, what percentage, if you know, were jailed after the guilty verdict?
Oh, since it started. 2001? I mean, so there's been 3 or 4 every year.
For every year. And do you know, it's okay if you don't, but do you know how many were put in jail after the guilty verdict as opposed to let free?
90%.
90%. So, all of those other ones who were jailed, they had their reputations ruined. They had their professional careers dashed and ruined as well. Why would they let you off when this is such a high-profile case and... you should have been in that 90% by all, reasonable standards. You should have been put in jail. Why is that?
I asked my QC afterwards why that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it was a combination of things.
Mm-hmm.
He said, first of all, the family didn't want me to go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
He said, secondly, the judge didn't really believe you were guilty.
Mm-hmm.
He said, and thirdly, he said, and I rarely use this term, he says, this was a political prosecution.
Okay. And that's the opinion of your counsel?
QC.
Okay. So this case that, in my opinion, has a lot of smoking guns, right? You've got the accusing assistant who was just disciplined prior. You've got the medical board or the
Royal College of Anaesthetists,
the RCA, who you had just sued previously in a high-profile case 2 weeks earlier, and you've got a judge who set you free when, by all accounts, at least 90% of all accounts, you should have been jailed.
Correct.
Right? So that all happens in 1999?
2001.
2001. So you come to America to start a new career, new life,
right?
Whatever, right? And then what happens?
So I relocated to the States in September 2001,
Mm-hmm.
and I commenced work at a number of hospitals in the New Jersey area.
Mm-hmm.
Now, eventually the case in the UK caught up with me because the guy who was the president, Strunin, contacted the authorities in the States and informed them of what had happened in England.
Mm-hmm.
I then had to go before the medical board in 2003, and we had a full-day hearing during which the case was discussed in every aspect of the applications, the paperwork in the for New Jersey, the case in England, and the medical board at that time decided that the only basis on which they were going to suspend me was the failure to disclose the case in England, but not the actual case. There was no basis, no legal basis for action, because there was no equivalent of that in the United States. And had that case occurred in America, it would, at the most, have been a medical malpractice suit,
Mm-hmm.
and would never have been dealt with in the criminal justice system.
Okay. Then what happened from that point?
Well, then I had the hearing before the medical board.
Mm-hmm.
I underwent the 6-month suspension. I used it to educate myself in the field of minimally invasive spine surgery. I took as many courses as I could. That was an emerging area.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back to practice in June 2004. And from June 2004 to April 2012, I built, what I would say was a very successful minimally invasive spine surgical practice in the northern New Jersey area, building a surgical center in 2011.
Okay. So now tell me about your history with the patients that you served in New Jersey.
Well, the majority of patients that came to see me, well, in fact, all the patients that came to see me had issues of pain,
Mm-hmm.
Principally in the neck, thoracic, or lower back, the lumbar region.
Mm-hmm.
And I would use a variety of techniques to both diagnose and help them with their pain. So that would involve MRIs, CAT scans, X-rays, EMGs. Sometimes I would use epidural injections or lumbar facet injections. These are just techniques whereby steroid is placed into the back
Mm-hmm.
to help with the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And then on those patients that continued to be symptomatic or the pain got worse, I would perform minimally invasive discectomies,
Mm-hmm.
and then if they failed, minimally invasive fusions.
Okay.
So over this time period from 2002 to 2012, I performed approximately 800 minimally invasive discectomies and fusions,
Mm-hmm.
and I performed approximately 6,000 interventional pain procedures.
Mm-hmm. So why were you found to not be qualified to do these procedures?
Well, I don't think it's a secret to anyone who's been following the case what this really was about.
Mm-hmm.
This was a professional battle between two groups of physicians, the neurosurgeons and the interventional pain physicians, of which I'm one.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the opinion of the neurosurgeon who testified against me that I was not qualified to perform these procedures,
Mm-hmm.
despite the fact that neither was he.
Mm-hmm.
And minimally invasive spine surgery is a relatively recent addition to the spine armamentarium.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that I had obtained my training was by going off and doing mini fellowships, spending a lot of time doing weekend courses, hands-on cadaver training courses.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said before, this was exactly how their expert did it. He, in fact, started later than me.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the basis of their allegation.
Mm-hmm.
But there was really no substance to that basis.
Mm-hmm.
There were no standards with regards to training and education.
Mm-hmm.
And again, during the hearing, their expert admitted this.
Mm-hmm. So
And just, sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
Greg, the reason, the example that I always give to people when we're talking about spine and this issue is look at cardiac care.
Mm-hmm.
25 years ago, when most people had a heart problem, they had their chest cut open and they had their valves or their coronary vessels fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Today, 95% of people will go to an interventional cardiologist who will insert a catheter into the vessel
Mm-hmm.
and fix the blockage.
Right. Now, how many, I mean, you were trained in this, right?
Correct.
How many have been done or were done prior to the operations or procedures you were doing? Any?
By anybody?
Yeah.
Well, some of the minimally invasive discectomies were done by other doctors who'd started in the mid to late 90s.
Mhm.
But I was actually the first doctor
Mhm.
in the world to perform what's called a minimally invasive outpatient fusion. So that's it's a particular procedure that's carried out on the spine. It's known as an interbody fusion, and I was able to work out a way to do it in an outpatient setting.
Okay.
Because up until that point, they had only been done in hospitals.
Okay, so it's your contention that when you started performing these procedures, you were the only one doing it, really, right?
Correct.
And achieving success with it.
Correct.
And then, so why was there like a jealousy or something? Like, why would they go after you for that?
Yeah, I think...
besides the fact that you were potentially an easy target based on all of what happened in the UK.
Yeah, well,
prior to that.
I think you're right. The case in the UK definitely put a big black target on my back, without question. I think the issue of professional envy and jealousy is a big factor in medicine. That happens a lot. You have to understand that most medical businesses operate like cottage industries. You know, they're not conglomerations. So they're all competing with each other for patients.
Right.
And the fact that I was building a successful practice, the fact that I was an interventional pain physician doing these procedures, in very simple terms, I was taking their business away, but I was doing it well.
Okay, and these were the people who went after you in terms of taking your license away.
Correct.
Okay, so then there was, probably pressure on the government.
Yep.
Again, using the history in the UK as the background to say we have to get rid of this guy.
Yeah,
what
look, I mean, it's
what you're contending.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely, it's so predictable and painfully obvious that it's easy to paint me out as the bad guy.
Right.
Oh, we've got this guy. He was charged with manslaughter in England, and then he comes here and he starts up this practice. I mean, it's
chain of events that.
So I knew exactly what was going on. So the people that kind of like reacted to that, in my opinion, did so without really investigating, first of all, what the case in England was, who I was, and what the practice was about.
Right. So give us an idea of the percentage of your record with these procedures and how that is relevant here.
Okay, and I've come out with these numbers on many occasions, okay? So first of all, let me just tell you what the industry standards are for complications and deaths.
Yeah.
So in spine surgery, there's an accepted complication range of 5 to 15%. Okay, there's an accepted death range of 3 to 5%. Okay. Now, I performed 800 procedures. I had no deaths. I had no life-threatening complications, and I had some patients, according to the state, allegedly 11, but it's significantly less than that, who had some poor outcomes. And all that means is that they still continue to have some pain after the procedure. And then there was one patient that they reference who supposedly, although there was never any pathological evidence, had an infection. So if you look at those numbers, I did 800 cases. I had no deaths, no life-threatening complications, and some relatively small amounts of poor outcomes. And when compared to the outcomes in the neurosurgical community, they are, without question, far superior.
Okay. So if this law were enacted, what that means, correct me if your understanding it would be different, is that someone like yourself may not get their license because of the conviction in the UK prior.
Correct.
Right? While there could be scores of doctors who are already practicing,
right,
who have horrific numbers,
right,
but weren't prosecuted because in America that we don't prosecute, we litigate in terms of malpractice.
Right.
So those doctors who could have a far worse, a terrible track record could continue to practice, yet someone like yourself who has very, very, very few complications per 800 that you've done, very successfully, you wouldn't be able to practice, and they would.
Correct. And that's the absurdity of this law, is that here in the state of New Jersey, and I know this for a fact because I'm still in touch with the medical community, there are a significant number of deaths that occur in hospitals and in surgical centres. These physicians do not lose their licenses, they do not get prosecuted criminally, and all that happens is what you said, is there's a legal lawsuit. So, from a personal note, I do feel as if the case that I went through in England was blown out of all proportion, okay, and that it was used as the basis for the suspension of my license here. And I think that, I do feel that was rather unfair and unjust, and I think that, as you just said, it makes no sense. If you've got a doctor who's in New Jersey and who has a patient dying every year, that nothing happens to him. But yet if he were in England, they'd prosecute him and send him to jail. And so introducing this law, I don't really know what it's going to achieve. I mean, there's already a shortage of doctors in New Jersey. Doctors are going to be leaving. They're going to be needing more doctors. And they're introducing a law that's now going to make it even harder for doctors to come to this state. So, I'm sure Miss Weinberg, had good intention when she started on this journey for whatever reason. But I think looking at it from a wider perspective, I think it's going to be counterproductive to the delivery of healthcare to the people of New Jersey.
I agree. Now, how long have you been without your license?
Since June 2012.
June 2012, so it's going on 3 years.
Yeah.
Now, full disclosure on our end, my background is video production and marketing, and Dr. Kaul and I have had a professional relationship in terms of, Dr. Kaul being my client, and we've become friends as well in this process. And I'd like to say that this has much bigger implications, right? Because you have, through this whole process, a doctor who is, markedly demonstrated, has a history of changing lives, pulled out of the system because of everything that's going on.
Right.
And it's an injustice to us as the public who needs good medical care.
Right. Well, very well said. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that, one of the things, Greg, actually, that I didn't bring up, I'll bring up very quickly because I know we're coming to the end of it, is in New Jersey and in a lot of American states, the medical boards are politically appointed. In other countries, they are elected by the doctors, so they are kind of democratically elected bodies. The problem I see with politically appointed medical boards is they become political tools, and whoever's in power then gets to use that tool to do his or her dirty work. And one of the things that would be great, if it ever could occur, would be to change that system and say, listen, we have 38,000 physicians in New Jersey. We're going to vote every 3 years as to who should or should not be on the medical board. And it should not be people who basically make the biggest donations to the political parties. That's not a democracy. I mean, we live in America. We vote for our president, right? He's not politically appointed, right?
Yep.
So don't you think we should vote for the medical board?
Absolutely. Okay, so if anyone has any questions or statements they want to make, or they want to reach out to you in any way, you've set up a website, right? For yourself.
There's a website. It's www.drdrrichardkaul.com.
Okay, so not only are you able to submit your questions or comments to Dr. Kaul directly through his website, but you can also submit it through our show, which is MyFavoriteShow.com. And you can listen to prior broadcasts there. You can watch videos of every single broadcast we do on MyFavoriteShow.com. You can also sign up for email alerts and text alerts. Send MFS to 313131, and you'll be put on our list. You can ask your questions that way as well. And we thank you for listening. Again, I'm Greg Riccardi. All right, we are back live. This is Greg Riccardi here. We just listened to 39 minutes of both Dr. Kaul's history, as well as some of the implications that this bill has, right? That's about to be proposed. Before we take a caller, do you have anything to say at this point, Doc? Or
No.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go to the phones. We have, I believe, Marcy on the line. Is that true? Marcy, hello.
Yes, hi.
How are you?
Good. Hello, Dr. Kaul. Hello, Greg. How are you?
Great.
Good evening.
Your question?
I just wanted to say I really enjoy your show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I do have a question. It seems extreme to use the criminal justice system for doctors who are trying to help people. Is anyone trying to change the law?
And you're talking about the law in the UK where they are able to prosecute someone criminally for what would be considered a malpractice suit here, right?
Yes.
This is a question directed to me, yeah?
Yes, Dr. Kaul.
That's a good question. And as I said in the interview, the Crown Prosecution Service really started to ramp up these types of prosecutions in the 1990s. And their logic was that if we're going to prosecute drivers when they're involved in accidents in which people die, then why should we not prosecute doctors? And that's when they started to bring more of these cases. And the British Medical Association, which is the union for the doctors in the United Kingdom, opposed the introduction of this law. They felt it was an inappropriate use of the criminal statute to prosecute physicians who, first of all, their intention is to help patients and to do what they can to alleviate patient suffering. And medicine, being an art and not a science, is kind of imprecise. So people aren't always sure of what the outcomes are going to be. And there's been a continuing debate about these types of cases, and the law has not been repealed as of yet, and doctors, unfortunately, in the United Kingdom, are still being prosecuted and charged and sent to jail when a patient dies. So it remains to be seen whether or not the law is going to be repealed. I mean, there's been a couple of high-profile cases that have been taken to the European Court of Human Rights by a number of doctors, and the court, which is based in Strasbourg, has either refused to offer an opinion on the law. But to answer your question, there is opposition from the doctors, and time will tell as to whether or not that particular law is scratched off the books.
Now, one question I have is that if you have a law like this where one false move, so to speak, in terms of in a procedure or while you're taking care of a patient, if they die or you maim someone or that has to have, and you tell me, that has to have an impact on the psyche of young people who want to get into the practice of medicine. Do you think it's making them potentially say, hey, I don't know if I want to go into that?
Yeah, and I can talk from that, obviously from personal experience, because I was 34 or 35 at the time, and of course somebody died, which I'm forever remorseful about, and I feel terrible about that. As a doctor, when any one has pain or a person loses their life, it's a painful thing emotionally. But from a more personal perspective, to go through something such as that was extremely traumatic, emotionally and psychologically, particularly when the intentions or my intentions were really just to help the patient. But I agree, it takes a huge toll, and in the many discussions that I've had with my other physician colleagues, who say it's a kind of an unproductive law, they don't feel that it does anything to raise medical standards. All it does is it creates an environment of fear without doing anything productive. So do you think
it's impacting the number of people that are going into the profession, or?
Well, actually, they did look at this, interestingly enough, and they did note that since the rise in prosecutions, there has been a decrease in the number of people entering medical school. Now, there were other factors that, of course, played into this, but when they did this study, they, this was one of the questions that was asked of young high school students and people who wanted to go into medicine about, the risks involved in it. And, this particular point was brought up in one of the questionnaires. So it definitely has been a factor. To what extent is difficult to say.
Yeah, if you're considering a career in, I think you had mentioned, driving a truck or, landscaping, and they said to you, well, if you do this wrong, even though your intentions are good, you could wind up in jail, and you're saying to yourself, do I want to do that? That would be
right, exactly.
Put second thoughts in my mind, right?
I agree. It is an oddity. It's so extreme that when people, when I came back to the States and I discussed it, people couldn't quite understand why such a law existed and why it was used. So.
Okay, excellent. We have another caller. I believe it's Mike from Prospect Park. Mike, you on the phone?
Yeah, hey guys.
How you doing?
Good. I just want to say, Doc, there's extraordinary story. Cell phone, 3 hours in an ambulance after they left your care, and still be able to, impose that type of penalty on you. That's fascinating. My question was, if the bill ever does become law, how are they ever going to be able to verify if someone's telling the truth about their past?
That's a good question. Yeah. The current system that they use in the US with regards to verification of people's credentials is when somebody makes an application to a state medical board or a hospital, they send that application form to what's called a credentials verification service. And that service, and there's a number of them located around the country, they then send those documents out to the countries of origin where they came from. And it's okay when you're dealing with other countries where they speak English. The problem arises when you're sending documents out to countries where they don't speak English, where the administrative systems are maybe not as organized as they are in the US. So it becomes expensive. You then have to employ a lot of people to follow up on those forms. You have to try and ensure that you're getting genuine forms back. So it wouldn't be an easy road to enforce the bill if it became law.
Excellent. Well, that music indicates a very sad time in your life and my life. It's coming to the end of the broadcast, and we're so happy to have been able to bring this issue to light, right, and shed some light on what could be a disastrous in a lot of respects. Right?
I agree. I think that the intention behind the bill is good, but I think the implementation is going to be a lot more expensive and fraught with problems than people anticipate.
Excellent. Well, thanks, folks, for listening. We'd like to remind you we have a website, www.MyFavoriteShow.com. You can call in with your questions next week, 800-962-1160, and sign up for email alerts and text alerts on our website, as well as view prior videos of broadcast. Thanks so much. We'll speak with you soon.
You've been listening to My Favorite Show, where Dr. Richard Kaul and Greg Riccardi discuss the matters that matter most. My Favorite Show is taped live Monday nights at 7 p.m. To watch the video of this broadcast in the WVNJ studio, visit MyFavoriteShow.com.